Emma Williams had promised herself she wouldn't let anyone drag her to another social event this month. Her energy was low, her mind cluttered, and her heart, still fragile from a breakup that had ended quietly but painfully, wasn't ready to face another crowd of strangers pretending to be happy. It had been months since she and Ryan parted ways, yet his absence echoed in every quiet night. Her apartment felt more like a reminder of loneliness than a home. The laughter that once filled it was gone, replaced by the hum of her phone that rarely rang. So when her best friend Lily called, insisting she come to a rooftop party downtown, Emma almost refused. "I'm not really in the mood for people," she said, staring at the half-finished cup of tea on her counter. Lily's voice came through, light but firm. "Exactly why you need to go. You've been hiding for too long. It's just one night, Em. You'll listen to music, maybe dance a little. If you hate it, I'll drive you home myself." Emma sighed, smiling faintly at her friend's persistence. "You're impossible to say no to. That's the spirit." "Be ready by 8," Lily chirped before hanging up. When the call ended, Emma stood there for a long moment, wondering if she was making a mistake. She hadn't dressed up in months, hadn't felt the need to. Her wardrobe felt like a collection of old lives she no longer fit into. After a few minutes of hesitation, she finally chose a simple navy blue dress, elegant but not flashy. She let her hair down, added a touch of perfume, and whispered to her reflection, "It's just one night, not a new beginning." Yet somewhere deep inside, she wished it could be. The night air was cool as she arrived at the venue, a rooftop overlooking the glowing skyline of Chicago. The sound of music drifted through the air, soft laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses. Fairy lights wrapped around railings, and people gathered in small groups, talking and swaying to the rhythm of a slow song. Emma paused at the entrance, her heart beating a little faster. She felt like a stranger stepping into a life that wasn't hers. Lily spotted her and rushed over, eyes lighting up. "You came. You look amazing, by the way." Emma smiled shyly. "I feel completely out of place. You'll fit right in. Come on, I'll get you a drink." As Lily disappeared into the crowd, Emma stood near the edge of the rooftop, looking down at the city lights stretching endlessly beneath her. The view was breathtaking, but it only reminded her how small she felt. She took a slow breath, willing herself to relax. Maybe if she stayed long enough, she could pretend to belong. Then she noticed him. A man stood a few steps away, leaning casually against the balcony railing, the glow from the lights catching the edge of his face. He wasn't trying to draw attention. There was something quiet about him, calm yet magnetic. His name, she would later learn, was Ethan Brooks. At that moment, she didn't know anything about him. Only that there was something in his stillness that felt strangely comforting. Their eyes met briefly before she quickly looked away. But the moment lingered. It wasn't like the kind of glance people exchange in crowded rooms. It felt slower, more deliberate, as if both had paused without meaning to. Emma turned back to the skyline, pretending to admire it, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She didn't know why her heart had started to race, or why a stranger's gaze had unsettled her calm. A few minutes later, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" She turned, and it was him. Up close, his features were even more striking. Not movie perfect, but real. Strong jawline, thoughtful eyes, the kind that seemed to notice everything without judging. "It is," Emma replied softly. "Though I think most people come here more for the photos than the view." He smiled slightly. "That's true. But you're not one of them, are you?" She laughed gently. "No, I guess I'm not." "I'm Ethan," he said, offering his hand. "Emma." They shook hands, and for a second, the world felt quieter. The crowd's noise faded, the music softened, and all that existed was this small moment between two people who hadn't planned to meet. They began to talk, at first about simple things. The music, the view, the way city lights seemed to tell their own story. But as minutes turned into an hour, their conversation grew deeper. Emma found herself sharing things she hadn't planned to, about her work in marketing, her love for painting, and how she sometimes felt invisible in the chaos of daily life. Ethan listened. Not the way people usually do while waiting to speak, but with genuine attention. He told her he'd recently moved back to Chicago after working overseas for a few years. Coming back felt strange, he admitted. Everything's familiar but somehow different. Like returning to a place that forgot you. I know exactly what you mean, Emma said quietly. Sometimes it's not the place that changes. It's us. Their eyes met again, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged, gentle but electric. She wasn't sure what to call it. Attraction, maybe, or recognition. Hours slipped by unnoticed. They laughed, shared stories, and found comfort in the ease of each other's company. Emma hadn't felt this light in months. With Ethan, conversation didn't feel like effort. It flowed naturally, like two people who had been waiting to speak the same language. When Lily returned, surprised to find Emma still there, she smiled knowingly. Well, looks like someone's having a better night than expected. Emma laughed, cheeks warm. Maybe I am. As the night grew late, people began to leave, but Emma and Ethan stayed by the balcony, neither wanting the moment to end. Finally, he said softly, I'm glad you decided to come tonight. Me too, she admitted. There was a pause, gentle but full. Then he asked, Would you want to meet again sometime? Emma hesitated, her heart uncertain but hopeful. I'd like that, he smiled. Then it's a plan. When Emma finally got home that night, the city was quiet, the air crisp. She slipped off her heels, sat by the window, and looked out at the skyline. Something inside her felt different, lighter, warmer. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. She thought about Ethan's words, about how he said coming back felt like rediscovering something lost. Maybe that's what this night had been for her too. A rediscovery. Of courage. Of hope. As she turned off the lights and settled into bed, a small smile played on her lips. The party she almost skipped had become the night that quietly changed everything, and though she didn't know where it would lead, for the first time in a long time, Emma was ready to find out. The morning after the rooftop party, Emma woke up later than usual. For the first time in months, she had slept without restless thoughts chasing her into the night. The sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, painting her apartment in a warm glow. She lay there for a while, smiling faintly as memories from last night returned, the music, the laughter, and most of all, Ethan's quiet eyes meeting hers across the crowd. She tried not to overthink it. It was just a good conversation, she told herself as she got ready for work. But deep down, she knew it had been more than that. Something about Ethan's calmness had stayed with her, like a gentle echo that refused to fade. At her office downtown, Emma tried to lose herself in the rhythm of her job. Emails, meetings, and presentations filled her morning, yet every so often she caught herself glancing at her phone, half expecting a message. By lunchtime, she felt silly for waiting. Maybe he was just being polite, she muttered, staring at her untouched sandwich. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hi, Emma. It's Ethan. Her heart skipped. Oh, hi! I wasn't sure you'd call. I said I would, didn't I? His voice carried that same warm tone she remembered. Listen, I know this is short notice, but would you like to grab coffee this weekend? There's this little cafe by the lake I've been meaning to try. Emma smiled before she could stop herself. Coffee sounds nice. Saturday morning? Perfect. After the call ended, Emma sat at her desk, her mind spinning in quiet excitement. The thought of seeing him again filled her with both nervousness and anticipation. For the first time in a long while, her week suddenly had something to look forward to. Saturday came quickly. Chicago's spring air was fresh, carrying the scent of rain that had fallen overnight. Emma wore a light beige sweater, jeans, and a scarf that fluttered gently in the breeze. When she arrived at the cafe, Ethan was already there, sitting outside with 2 cups of coffee and a small smile that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. I ordered for you, he said. Hope you still take it with a little cream? She laughed. You remembered? Hard to forget. They sat together, the lake shimmering behind them as sunlight danced on the water. Their conversation began easily, like picking up where they left off. They talked about books, favorite places in the city, and little things that made them feel alive. Emma learned that Ethan worked as an architect and had recently returned to the States after living abroad for several years. "Why did you come back?" she asked. He looked out at the lake, thoughtful. "I guess I realized I was chasing things that didn't mean much. Success, travel, new cities. But none of it felt like home. I wanted something real again." His honesty caught her off guard. She understood that feeling too well. That quiet emptiness even when everything seems fine. "Sometimes," she said softly, "it's not the place that makes us feel at home. It's the people." Ethan looked at her, his expression gentle. "Maybe that's what I'm hoping to find this time." Her cheeks warmed, and she turned her eyes to the lake to hide her smile. Hours passed unnoticed. They walked along the path by the water, laughing about small things, like how Emma couldn't ride a bike without wobbling, or how Ethan once accidentally walked into the wrong meeting abroad and pretended to be part of it. Their laughter felt easy, natural. At one point, they stopped near a small pier. The air was crisp, the city distant behind them. Ethan turned to her, his tone softer now. "You know, when I first saw you at that party, you looked like someone trying to disappear." Emma blinked, surprised. "I probably was." "But then," he continued, "you smiled at something your friend said. Just a small smile, but it felt real. That's what caught my attention." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever noticed her that way, not just how she looked, but what she felt beneath it. "You really pay attention, don't you?" He smiled faintly. "I try to." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the soft sound of water lapping against the pier. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt awkward. It was peaceful, full of meaning. By the time the sun began to set, Emma knew she didn't want the day to end. Yet when Ethan offered to walk her home, she hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes, but another part, the cautious side still healing from old wounds, whispered for her to take things slowly. At her apartment entrance, she turned to him. "Thank you for today. I didn't realize how much I needed this." He smiled gently. "Then I'm glad I called." They lingered a moment longer, the evening breeze brushing softly between them. "Can I see you again?" he asked. Emma nodded. "I'd like that." After he left, she went inside and leaned against the door, her heart still racing. It wasn't love yet. It was something gentler, quieter, like a spark waiting to grow. She didn't want to rush it. She wanted to feel every small moment, every heartbeat that reminded her she was alive again. The following days passed with lightness. They began to talk more often. Short calls, shared jokes, the occasional good morning text that made her smile before work. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was steady. For Emma, that steadiness felt like safety. One evening, while she painted in her small studio corner, her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "You busy?" he asked. "Not really." "Why?" "I'm near your place. I thought I'd drop by with something." A few minutes later, there was a knock. When she opened the door, he stood there holding a small potted plant. "You said you kill every flower you buy," he said with a grin. "So I got you something harder to kill." Emma laughed, touched. "You really didn't have to." "I wanted to." She placed the plant on her windowsill and turned to him. "It's perfect." They talked for hours that night, not about anything extraordinary, but about real things. Childhood dreams, favorite songs, even fears. It amazed her how easy it felt, how natural it was to let him in. Later, when he left, Emma found herself staring at the little plant, its green leaves catching the moonlight. It wasn't just a small gift. It was a reminder that maybe life still had new beginnings waiting, even after heartbreak. And as she looked out at the city lights, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this time I won't run away." She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to find out. The weeks that followed were like a quiet dream Emma didn't want to wake from. She and Ethan had slipped into a rhythm: coffee runs, long walks after work, and calls that stretched late into the night. They weren't officially anything, but there was a closeness that felt unspoken, almost sacred. He brought warmth into her days without trying too hard, and she, in turn, found herself smiling at the smallest things again. Yet beneath the sweetness, Emma felt something she couldn't quite name: a hesitation, a quiet fear of letting it go too far. She had been hurt before, and her heart, though healing, still carried scars that whispered caution. Ethan seemed to sense that. He never pushed, never demanded more. He was patient, content to just be there. One Friday evening, Emma was at her desk, finishing up a project, when a message from Ethan popped up. "Come to the rooftop." It was the same rooftop where they had first met a month ago. She smiled, grabbed her coat, and hurried upstairs. When she stepped out into the cool evening air, she saw him standing by the railing, his hair slightly tousled by the wind. A small picnic table set up beside him with 2 cups of coffee and a slice of cake. "You did all this?" she said, laughing softly. He shrugged. "I thought we could celebrate surviving another week." They sat together, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the sounds of life below made the moment feel even more intimate. Ethan leaned back and looked at her. "You've been quiet lately," he said gently. "Something on your mind?" Emma hesitated. She didn't want to ruin the mood, but his voice, steady, kind, made her feel safe enough to speak. "I'm just scared sometimes," she admitted. "You've been great, Ethan. Better than I deserve, maybe. But I don't know if I'm ready to feel something again." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for his coffee, took a slow sip, and said, "You don't have to be ready. Just honest." That caught her off guard. "Honest?" He nodded. "If you're scared, say it. If you're unsure, tell me. I don't need perfect. I just want real." His words sat in the air like something heavy but beautiful. Emma felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from being seen. She looked away, blinking them back. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he admitted. "But I think the best things never are." They sat in silence for a while, the city humming below them. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice low. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "The night we met," he said, "I almost didn't come. My friend dragged me out. I wasn't in the mood for crowds or small talk. But then I saw you, standing by the railing, looking like you wanted to be anywhere else. And I thought, maybe I wasn't the only one trying to find some air." Emma smiled faintly. "So, what made you walk over?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Something about you felt familiar, like I'd known you long before that night." Her breath caught. For a second, she didn't know what to say. She wanted to tell him she had felt it too, that strange pull, that instant sense of recognition. But before she could, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in months: Liam. Her ex. The timing couldn't have been worse. She froze, her fingers tightening around the phone. Ethan noticed. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she said quickly, shoving it into her pocket. But her expression betrayed her. Ethan didn't press, though she could feel his quiet curiosity. After that, The mood shifted slightly. Not awkward, but heavier. They still talked, still laughed, but something hung in the air. When she went home that night, she couldn't shake the image of Ethan's eyes when he saw the name flash across her screen. There was no anger in them, only quiet concern, the kind that made her feel both guilty and cared for at the same time. Later that night, she opened her messages. Liam's text was simple. "Hope you're doing well. Been thinking about you." She stared at it for a long time before locking her phone. Her heart didn't ache the way it once did. Instead, it felt confused. Like two doors in her heart had opened at once, and she wasn't sure which one to walk through. The next day, Ethan showed up at her office building with lunch. He smiled as if nothing had happened. "Thought you could use a break," he said. She looked at him, guilt flickering behind her eyes. "Ethan, about last night," he shook his head gently. "You don't owe me an explanation." But she felt like she did. "It was my ex. He texted. I didn't reply, but it threw me off." Ethan nodded slowly, his voice steady. "I figured. You don't need to apologize for your past, Emma. We all have one." His calmness almost broke her. "You're too understanding sometimes." He smiled faintly. "I've been where you are." Something about the way he said it made her wonder what stories he carried. But before she could ask, he changed the subject, light-heartedly, gently pulling her back to the present. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking in the park nearby, the tension slowly melting away. Still, that night, Emma lay awake, replaying everything. The message, Ethan's patience, the way he looked at her when he said he understood. She realized then that what scared her wasn't love. It was the possibility of losing something real again. A week passed. Emma deleted Liam's number, not out of anger, but because she didn't want old memories dictating her new life. She texted Ethan, "Dinner's on me tonight." When he arrived at her apartment, she'd set up a small table by the window, candles flickering softly. "You didn't have to go all out," he said, smiling. "I wanted to," she replied. They ate, laughed, and when the rain began to fall outside, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The city lights shimmered through the raindrops, and Ethan reached across the table, brushing his fingers lightly against hers, not demanding, just a quiet gesture. "That said, I'm here." For a moment, she let her guard down. "You make it easy to believe in something again," she said softly. He looked at her with that calm intensity she was learning to love. "That's because it's real." Their eyes met, and time seemed to still. It wasn't the beginning of a love story full of fireworks. It was quieter, deeper. A slow unfolding of trust between two people who had been broken before but were brave enough to try again. As the rain fell harder, Ethan stood to leave, but she stopped him at the door. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm glad you came to that party." He smiled. "So am I." When he was gone, she looked out at the rain, her heart lighter, her fears softer. For the first time, she didn't feel like running away. Something had shifted that night. Not everything was perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. 2 weeks later, life felt almost too calm. Emma and Ethan had settled into a rhythm that felt natural. Weekend breakfasts, late-night talks, and moments that felt like quiet promises. But as often happens, peace doesn't last forever. It was a Thursday morning when Emma's past unexpectedly knocked again. This time not through a text, but in person. She had just finished her coffee when there was a knock on her office door. She looked up and froze. It was Liam, standing there, holding a small folder and a nervous smile. "Hey, Emma," he said softly. "Didn't think you'd still be working here." Her stomach tightened. "What are you doing here, Liam?" "I'm working with a new client." "Turns out it's the same firm," he said, gesturing to the logo on her office wall. "I swear it wasn't planned." The air grew heavy, She wanted to believe him. Maybe it really was coincidence. But the suddenness of it all made her uneasy. She nodded curtly. Okay, well, good luck with your project. He didn't leave. You look happy. Different, actually. Thanks, she said, turning back to her computer, hoping he'd take the hint. But as he walked away, she couldn't ignore the familiar ache that crept back in. Not longing, just the sting of old memories. They had once loved each other deeply, before it all fell apart under the weight of mismatched dreams and broken trust. That evening, Ethan called. How was work? Emma hesitated. Fine, just strange day. Strange how? She told him, trying to sound casual. But Ethan's tone changed. Quieter, more thoughtful. Liam's back? Apparently, she sighed. He's part of a project at my firm. I didn't expect to see him again. Ethan was silent for a moment. Are you okay with that? I am, she said quickly. It's just awkward, that's all. I get it. He paused, then added softly, just don't let him pull you back into old pain, okay? His voice wasn't jealous, but protective. A kind of care that felt deeper than words. Emma smiled faintly. I won't, but over the next few days things grew complicated. Liam was around the office often. He was polite, professional, and sometimes tried to strike up small talk. Emma kept her distance, but whispers in the office started. People remembered their past, and gossip spread faster than she could stop it. One afternoon, while she was grabbing lunch, a coworker joked, So, are you and Liam getting back together? Emma froze. What? No! But she knew how things looked. Ethan didn't work with her. He didn't see the daily interactions, the casual hellos, the small but awkward moments. And though she had nothing to hide, she started worrying about how he'd feel. Her fears came true that Friday evening. Ethan came to pick her up after work. As they walked out of the building, Liam happened to step into the lobby. He nodded politely at Emma, then at Ethan. Hey, Emma, see you Monday. Ethan smiled back, but his eyes were searching hers. Once they were outside, he spoke quietly. You didn't tell me you two were working that closely. I didn't think it mattered, she said quickly. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Maybe it doesn't, I thought you'd mention it. She hated the distance in his voice. Ethan, nothing's going on. You know that, right? I do, he said. But I also know how memories work. They don't always fade just because we want them to. That night they barely spoke. Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how something so small could suddenly feel like a wall between them. She wanted to fix it, but part of her didn't know how. The next morning, she went to see Ethan. He opened the door, his face tired but kind. You didn't have to come, he said softly. I did, she replied, because I can't stand this silence. They sat across from each other, words hanging heavy between them. Finally, Emma spoke. Ethan, you've been nothing but patient with me, but I need you to trust me. Not because I've earned it perfectly, but because I'm trying. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. I do trust you, Emma. I just care more than I expected to, and that scares me. His honesty hit her like a wave. It wasn't accusation, it was vulnerability. He wasn't angry. He was afraid of losing her. Emma reached across the table and took his hand. Then let's be scared together. He smiled, the tension in his eyes softening. Deal. They spent the day together, walking, talking, laughing again. The heaviness lifted slowly, replaced by something stronger than before. But just as things seemed to settle, fate had one last surprise. That Monday, Emma's boss asked her to lead a presentation, alongside Liam. There was no way around it. It was an important project, and she had to be professional. She told Ethan about it the night before. He nodded, trying to hide his discomfort. I know it's work, he said simply. The next morning, she walked into the meeting room, nerves tightening her chest. Liam smiled politely. We've done this before, he said quietly. Just like old times. Except now, it's different, she replied firmly. The meeting went smoothly. When it ended, Liam lingered by the door. "You've really changed, Emma," he said softly. "I mean that in a good way." She gave a small smile. "Thanks. I had to." That evening, Ethan met her at the cafe by the lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and pink. She told him everything. How the meeting went, what Liam had said, how she had handled it. When she finished, Ethan exhaled, relief flickering in his eyes. "You know what I realized?" he said. "I was never really worried about him. I was worried about me, about how much you've started to mean to me." Emma felt her throat tighten. "Ethan, I've tried to stay calm, to take things slow, but the truth is, you're in every thought now, and that's new for me. Scary, but new." She reached out, her hand finding his. "Then we're both learning, aren't we?" He smiled, the tension of the past days melting away. The lake shimmered behind them, the wind soft and cool. For a long moment, neither spoke. It wasn't necessary. The quiet between them said enough, that despite fear, doubt, and old wounds, something real had taken root. As the sky darkened, Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you stayed," she whispered. He looked down at her. "I don't plan on going anywhere." And for the first time in years, Emma felt something she hadn't believed in anymore. Peace. Not the fragile kind that comes and goes, but the kind that stays, built on understanding, patience, and love that grows quietly between two imperfect hearts. The city lights flickered in the distance, and the sound of the water wrapped around them like a promise. The past had tested them, but the present, this simple, honest connection, had won. That night, as Emma walked home, she realized that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes softly, like a familiar song you didn't know you'd been missing. And that was enough. The following weeks passed like quiet waves, steady, calm, and filled with something Emma hadn't felt in a long time: certainty. The tension that once clouded her and Ethan's connection had faded. They laughed more, talked deeply, and began to understand each other's hearts without needing to explain everything. What had started as an unexpected connection on a party night was now becoming something that felt like home. It was a crisp Friday evening when Ethan called her, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey, Emma, you free tonight?" "I was about to make dinner," she said, smiling. "Why?" "Good, don't. I'm taking you somewhere," she chuckled. "Is this another one of your surprises?" "You'll see," he said before hanging up. Half an hour later, he was at her door, holding a single white rose. "No reason," he said with a grin. "Just because." They drove out of the city toward the coast. The sun was dipping behind the hills, painting everything in gold and amber. Emma glanced at him as he drove, his calm profile, the small smile playing on his lips, and she felt her heart swell. For so long she had chased excitement, grand gestures, dramatic romance. But this, the peace she felt sitting next to Ethan, was far more meaningful. When they arrived, the ocean stretched endlessly before them, shimmering beneath the fading light. He had brought a blanket, 2 cups of hot cocoa, and a small speaker softly playing old jazz tunes. Emma sat beside him, smiling. "You really thought of everything." "I just wanted a night where the world could slow down," he said quietly. "We've both been through a lot. I think we deserve a little peace." For a while, they just sat there, listening to the rhythm of the waves. Then Ethan spoke again, his tone softer than before. "You know, when I met you at that party, I didn't think much of it. You were this bright, confident woman talking about books and travel and dreams, and I thought, she's way out of my league." Emma laughed. "You didn't seem nervous at all." "Oh, I was," he said, smiling. "But something told me not to walk away. I'm glad I didn't." She looked at him, her heart tightening in the best way. "So am I." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I tell you something honest?" "Always." "I think I started falling for you that night," he said simply. "Not because of how you looked or what you said, but because you listened, really listened, when I talked about my mom, about work, about all the boring stuff. You made me feel seen." Emma felt her throat tighten. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not without expectation, not without a hidden agenda. Just truth. I didn't plan any of this either, she admitted. I just wanted a night to escape. I didn't expect to find someone who would quietly fit into all the spaces I didn't know were empty. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the wind fill the quiet. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. A shared silence that spoke louder than any words. After a while, Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for you," he said. Emma frowned. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside was a simple photo, the two of them from the charity event they'd attended weeks ago. She hadn't even realized anyone had taken a picture. In the photo, she was laughing, her head tilted slightly toward him, while Ethan was looking at her with that quiet, fond expression he often wore. "I printed it the next day," he said. "I kept it on my desk because it reminded me that sometimes happiness isn't about big moments. It's about who you share the small ones with." Emma smiled, blinking back tears. "That's really sweet, Ethan," he shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just being honest." She reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You've become the safest place I know," she whispered. For a long time, neither of them moved. The world seemed to pause, only the sound of the waves and the slow rhythm of their hearts between them. As the sky deepened into night, Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about what's next?" she asked softly. "Every day," he said. "But I'm not in a rush. I just know I want to keep showing up. For you. For us," she smiled, her eyes glistening. "That's all I need to hear." But life had one last small test for them. A week later, Emma got an unexpected call, a job offer from another city. A bigger role, higher pay, everything she had once dreamed of. Yet, as she stared at the offer letter, excitement didn't flood her like she thought it would. Instead, she felt torn. That evening, she met Ethan at the same lakeside cafe. "I got a job offer," she said quietly. His smile faded a little. "Where?" "Chicago," he nodded slowly. "That's amazing, Emma. You deserve it. But you don't look happy." He sighed. "I am happy for you. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't scare me. I don't want to lose what we've started." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "I don't want to lose it either." He looked at her carefully. "So what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," she said after a moment, "that for the first time in my life, I don't want to run towards something just because it's shiny. I want to stay where my heart feels at peace." Ethan's eyes softened. "Are you saying you're staying?" She smiled. "I'm saying I'm choosing you, and the life that feels real." He exhaled, relief flooding his face. Then he leaned across the table, his voice low and full of warmth. "Emma, I've been waiting for someone who chooses not just the easy parts, but all of it. The messy, ordinary, beautiful parts. And that's you." Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Then maybe we both finally found what we were looking for." Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent. They stepped out into the night, walking hand in hand down the quiet street. Every step felt like a promise, not grand, not dramatic, but steady and sure. As they reached the corner, Ethan stopped, turning to face her. "You know, I never believed in fate before," Emma smiled gently. "And now? Now I think it just needed a little help. Maybe one party night and a stubborn woman who wouldn't stop dancing." She laughed, her heart full. "Then I'm glad I didn't stop." He pulled her close, their foreheads touching as the snow drifted around them. No words, no grand gestures, just two hearts, finally still, finally home. For the first time, Emma realized love didn't need to be perfect to be right. It just needed to be true. And under the quiet glow of the city lights, that truth was all that mattered. The end.